Welcome to the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Houston. I'm the Reverend D. Scott Cooper, Assistant Minister for a congregation that welcomes you and extends a heartfelt and inclusive invitation to join us in meaningful worship and in service to the world. We greet each of you, those here with us in person and those who are joining us online via Livestream. Our congregation is again blessed with an embarrassment of riches for this service. No, it's not a heavenly host of angels you hear singing, although the confusion is understandable. Dr. Jolie Rock is again here leading our singing. Indeed. And we are honored to have Micah LaGrave preaching for us this morning. Micah has his Master of Divinity from Andover Newton Theological School and is currently attending Unity Urban Ministerial School. Once ordained, Micah will pursue hospice chaplaincy. As a trans man, Micah is interested in the intersection between social justice and spirituality, and he is married to Reverend Michelle LaGrave, the interim minister at Emerson UU. Thank you for joining us this morning. And please rise in body or spirit and join Dr. Rock in singing number 347 in the gray hymnal, Gather the Spirit.
Come Sit by Our Fire by Jennifer Kitchen. Come sit by our fire and let us share stories. Let me hear your tales of far-off lands, wanderer, and I tell you of my travels. Share your experience of the holy with me, worshiper, and I will tell you of that which I find divine. Come and stay, lover of leaving, for ours is no caravan of despair, but of hope. We would hear your stories of grief and sorrow as readily of those of joy and laughter. For there is a time and a place and a hearing for all the stories of this world. Stories are the breath and the word of the Spirit of life, that power that we name love. Come, for our fire is warm, and we have seats for all. Come again, and yet again. Come, speak to me of what fills your heart, what engages your mind, what resides in your soul. Come, let us worship together.
Candles have been used for centuries for rituals and by myriad world religions. Light, being considered the symbol of joy and life-giving power, goes back as far as human history and appears in many cultures. Today, we acknowledge the convergence of several observances and the beginnings of holidays as we light these candles as part of a unique ritual. In the Jewish faith, the 8-day holiday of Hanukkah, or Festival of Lights, is celebrated by lighting a special Hanukkah menorah to commemorate the rededication of the temple in Jerusalem. The Hanukkah lights symbolize that God maintained his covenant with the Jewish people during a time of oppression and their resistance to that oppression. While we don't presume to replicate a solemn Jewish ceremony, we do light a candle on this, the first day of Hanukkah, in recognition of our tradition's connection to Judaism, in honor of the Jewish members and friends of our congregation, and as an expression of solidarity with Jewish communities here in Houston and throughout the world. It is also the first Sunday of Advent. We light a candle in the Advent wreath to mark both the days approaching the solstice and the advent of Christmas. Inspired by the neo-pagan tradition, this first Sunday of Advent, we light a candle in the south, honoring the element of fire. Fire burns away the old and creates space for the new. Fire flames in the sky in the form of the day star. The sun warms and blesses and brings energy to nurture all life that we know. Fire can also destroy. We light this candle mindful of the gifts and dangers that fire brings. Blessed be. Wednesday, December 1st, is World AIDS Day, first observed in 1988. Each year, organizations and individuals across the world bring attention to the HIV epidemic and call for an increased response to move toward ending the HIV epidemic. Today, we light this candle in memory of those we have lost to AIDS, to honor those working to erase the stigma, and to thank those working to make sure fewer people die each year from the disease. In our May 24th, 2020 service, we combined a Memorial Day remembrance and candle ritual with one to remember those who had died from COVID-19. The first cases had been reported in the United States just months before, and by the day of that first candle ritual, there had been over 90,000 deaths. We have repeated this ritual since then as the numbers of those who died multiplied, each time hoping the need for such a remembrance would soon be unnecessary. Sadly, we marked the year anniversary of these rituals with another, still online, but hopeful because of a vaccine. As we were in August, we are again in the sanctuary, but the existence of safe, effective vaccines has not prevented continued infections. Lives continue to be lost. And so, yet again, we also pause to remember and mourn those who have died due to the pandemic sweeping our country and world. The last time we lit the large candle in August, there were 216 million confirmed cases of COVID-19 and over 4.5 million deaths across the world. Today, there are 261 million cases and over 5 million deaths. We again light a large candle for all those killed by this pandemic across the world. The number of deaths in the United States has increased from 636,000 in August to 777,000 today. Each number represents not only an individual who died, but family and friends who mourn. We cannot light a candle for each of these, but each small candle that we light represents over 50,000 lives lost so far in this pandemic. This pandemic has worn on far longer than we imagined, going on 2 years, and has claimed far more lives than we could have imagined. We mourn for those lost and hold their families and loved ones in the warmth of our community. More than 17,000 more people have died from COVID in Texas since we lit these candles, from 56,500 to nearly 74,000. We cannot light a candle for each of these, but each small candle we light represents almost 5,000 lives lost so far in this pandemic. These we remember and mourn were our friends, our neighbors, our co-workers, our relatives, those we knew and loved. They have passed from us far too early and far too unnecessarily. As we remember them, may we get vaccinated, encourage others to do so, and take proper precautions so that fewer of our friends and neighbors contract this virus. There are few objects as ancient and universal as candles. They have been used for centuries and are used in countless world religions. Today, we have lit these candles to both look forward in anticipation and to shift our gaze behind to remember important events and those loved ones we have lost. May the warmth and light of these candles remain with us in the days ahead. Amen.
Johann Sebastian Bach in 1730 as a solo cantata to be sung on the 15th Sunday after Trinity, which is usually the second Sunday in September. The text of this selection urges us to shout to God in every land. All creatures in heaven and earth must exalt his glory. We want to bring an offering of sacrifice to our God also now, since in affliction and distress, in all times, God has stood with us. Sit,
Thank you so much. Please join me in the spirit that some call meditation and others name prayer. Breathe with me the breath of life. Inhale as we share this interwoven, intricate web of affinity. Exhale as we feel one another's presence. Breathe with me as we gather to do the holy work of kinship and support. Open your mind, open your hearts. God of many names and mystery beyond all our naming. The day set aside for intentional thanksgiving has passed, but we remain grateful. Despite nearly 2 years when sickness and death has wrested the focus from wellness and life, and thoughts of contagion has kept us apart. Despite half a decade when it has been easier to focus on what divides us rather than what unites us, despite all this, we lift up hope and are grateful. Despite an unjust yet unsurprising verdict the week before, we saw those who believed they would not be held accountable. Yet we recognize even this is not gratifying justice. The authorities had claimed there was no cause to arrest the murderers, and only after public outrage and a leaked videotape was a trial allowed. Despite all this, we are grateful and lift up hope because we know we will join with and amplify the voices of those typically ignored by our justice system. Our world is full of both joys and concerns. Despite this, or perhaps because of it, we lift up hope and are grateful. We pray in the names of all those known and unknown, present and absent, remembered and forgotten. We pray in the names of all helpers of humankind. Amen. We pause now together to lift up that which sits heavy and light on our hearts. We hold Penny Serling and her family in our hearts. Her father, Robert Serling, passed away at the age of 98. We continue to keep Rebecca Gray, who is very ill, in our prayers. Rebecca is the partner of Patrick Martin, the son of Edie Shreve. Rebecca and Patrick live in Seattle. And I must mark the passing of the preeminent Broadway composer and lyricist of my lifetime, Stephen Sondheim. Rarely has one person so transformed an art form. I invite you now to say the name or bring to mind those you wish to be held by the loving embrace of this religious community. They are part of the great cloud of witness and memory, and we will, even if we do not know their names, hold them in our hearts. In this great cloud of witness and memory, amid this beloved community, we hear these names and hold them in our hearts. Let us remember the suffering and joy amid and among our community that we do not know. We pause in awe and wonder of the beauty, diversity, and mystery that is life. In the spirit of love, in the spirit of hope, and in the spirit of compassion, I invite each of you to enter into a time of silent prayer, meditation, or reflection.
Last Sunday, we delivered the non-perishable goods you donated as part of our Feed the Community food drive to the Emergency Aid Coalition. Because we know that needs aren't completely met by the generosity shown by the fourth Thursday in November, the EAC is again the recipient of our shared offering this week. In 1983, First Church was part of the Interfaith Coalition of member congregations that established the EAC, and we continue to provide financial support. We invite you to make your shared offering to help the EAC assist our neighbors who are now facing greater challenges due to the current health and economic crisis. We appreciate your generous contribution. Those in our sanctuary will find the instructions for text giving in the order of service. And those watching the live stream will see the instructions on your screen. Our regular Sunday morning offering collection invites us to weave the tapestry in love and action. We ask you to give generously, and offering will now be gratefully received.
Please join me in reading the dedication found in your order of service. To the work of this church, which is weaving a tapestry of love and action, we dedicate our lives and these our offerings.
The Butterfly Effect by Dana Capasso. The delicate flapping wings of a butterfly have the power to set molecules of air in motion, in turn moving more molecules of air, a tiny act that is eventually capable of affecting weather patterns on the other side of the planet. This notion comes from a concept within chaos theory called the butterfly effect. Simply, the butterfly effect refers to a phenomenon in our world in which a small change in one place can result in equal or greater changes elsewhere. This may seem crazy. A tiny butterfly changing global weather patterns? Not only is the butterfly effect a real scientific theory, but it's also an intriguing philosophical idea. I say all this because the butterfly effect affects the way I live my life and the decisions that I make in a way that no ideas about God ever have. I'm no meteorologist, nor am I versed in entomology, but ever since learning about the butterfly effect, I have been attracted to it because it demonstrates an important principle that is often forgotten. Namely, each of our actions has effects that are more profound than we think. Interconnection is a major theme found in nearly all the world's religious and philosophical traditions. The interconnectedness of our universe is also one of the most significant revelations of physics. All components of matter are interconnected, interrelated, and interdependent. As Unitarian Universalists, we affirm and promote our responsibility to remain aware of interconnection through our seventh principle, respect for the interdependent web of all existence. Attention to interconnectivity reminds me, despite the many socio-political forces that work to divide us from one another, that I'm never alone in this world. It reminds me that each decision or action that I make has reactions, and that those reactions reverberate as waves moving back and forth across the globe. This compels me to live my life aware of the consequences of my daily actions, from the purchases I make to personal interactions with others. I certainly do not always succeed, but I try. My awareness of interconnectivity and efforts to work against the illusion of division remain my most significant spiritual practice. This spiritual practice also gives me the ability to stand in awe of interconnection, in awe of the butterfly effect, and the power that comes with it. On rare occasions, I am reminded to stop and appreciate the divinity of interconnectivity revealed before my very eyes. This to me is awe-inspiring. This to me is divine.
Please join in singing hymn number 323. 1023, Building Bridges. 1023, Building Bridges. Building bridges between our divisions. I reach out to you. Will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmony. Building bridges between our divisions. I reach out to you. Will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmony.
Before I begin, I'd like to thank Reverend Scott for inviting me to your pulpit this morning. It is an honor to be here with you all. In Unitarian Universalism, there are 7 core principles which unite congregations across the globe. It is these core principles which guide the way that people are to relate to each other and to the world. The 7th principle reads, respect for the interdependent web of all existence that we are all a part. The first principle upholds the inherent worth and dignity of every person. How, in this divisive environment, are we to live out these principles? What does it mean to embrace the inherent worth and dignity of every person when emotions run high and there seems to be no way to meet in the middle? We are indeed a divided nation, and at times it feels so discouraging that we do not know what to do. Even when we are around like-minded people, there's often disagreement about how to bring about the change we seek. I think back to the 60s when there was the tension between the work of Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and the Black Panthers. These movements were on the same side of history. They each sought to bring about social change through racial and economic justice. However, their methods were very different. Who was right? I once heard the great statesperson Andrew Young say this when asked about the Black Panthers. Someone had to kick down the door so that I could walk through. In this, he was saying that each movement was necessary to bring about social change. Even as great as the changes that were brought about by the civil movements were, they are not enough. These changes took place within a system that was based in a belief of separation and lack. It is a system that is very much alive today. In order for true equality to come about, we need to raise our consciousness as a society to a new way of thinking about the way we relate to each other. We need to move beyond a dualistic system and embrace one which celebrates the unique gifts that each and every one of us brings to the table. The current mentality that we have is not working. We have created a mess that needs fixing, and it is up to each of us to be a part of the solution. In his book, Creating a World That Works for All, Sharif Abdullah suggests there are 3 types of belief systems that define the way that people throughout history have lived. There are the keepers, the breakers, and the menders. He defines keepers as indigenous people who live their lives inextricably connected to our local ecology. Their fundamental operating belief is, we are one. Keepers behave as though they are part of the earth. For them, no one group or species is more important than the other. Breakers are people whose fundamental operating belief is, I am separate, and whose operating assumption is there is not enough. The breaker story is creating a world that works for me. Breakers treat the earth as their own property, a life support system for them to use as they please. They seek ever greater control over all aspects of life on earth, while behaving as though they were exempt from the laws of nature. Menders are people whose fundamental operating belief is, we are one, and whose operating assumption is there is enough for all. Menders seek to restore balance with the earth and consciously live their lives as an integral part of living on this sacred planet. They seek ways to bring healing to themselves and the earth. For Abdullah, we are currently operating out of a breaker mentality which has gotten us into the mess that we are currently in. He passionately lays out how we got into this mess and how we can become a mender society by raising our consciousness to an awareness that there is no separation between us and all of creation. The truth is that we are all breakers. We have been socialized into a dualistic system which nurtures beliefs in rugged individualism and celebrates the achievements of humankind over the interests of the rest of creation. The other truth is that we all have the capacity to be menders. What is necessary to move from breaker behavior to mender behavior is a consciousness of our interconnectedness. Each day, we must examine our behavior against the yardstick of how what we are doing is contributing to the benefit for all. We must examine our core beliefs which shape our behavior. Where are our beliefs and our behaviors contributing to a belief in separation? Where are we embracing the belief in lack? We live in a dualistic society where things are defined as good or bad, Democrat or Republican, have or have not, illegal or citizen, male or female, educated or uneducated, blue collar or white collar, believer or unbeliever, racist or anti-racist, gay or straight, able-bodied or disabled. There are so many other ways that we see this dualism that are harmful to creating a world that works for all. Sometimes we are not even aware of how this dualistic thinking is at work in our lives because it is such an ingrained part of who we are, ingrained in us since we were children. We come by dualism honestly. However, this does not absolve us of the responsibility to become aware of it and consciously work to change how we fundamentally are in the world. We must become menders if we are to change the way in which we see the world. The multitude of problems that we face in the world stem from one source: the belief in separation. If we are to move beyond dualism, we must realize and be transformed by the understanding that we are all one. Abdullah lists 49 of the many problems which face us as the human race, which include political and social alienation, extinction of species, suicide, the status of the environment, isms of all sorts, political corruption, militarization of outer space, economic and class disparities, war, overconsumption, and the list goes on. These are not separate elements, but are symptoms of a single condition that is the mess that we are all in. All these symptoms are connected. When we focus on one or two, others get exacerbated. We need to move beyond single-issue justice to seeing the system as a whole and understand that it needs to change in order for us to come fully into who we have been created to be. We need to move beyond Democrat or Republican, Trump supporter or Biden supporter, racist or anti-racist, and whatever else divides us, so we can see our common humanity, for when we do, walls break down. We need to work hard to understand where others are coming from moving beyond the black and white into the gray area that sees the perspective of the other. When we say that all voices are welcome at the table, we must truly mean that all voices are welcome, regardless of if we disagree with them or not. There are many sides of the issues we face. People have different life experiences, thus come at things differently. We need to listen to all voices if we are to truly move beyond separation to oneness. We need to move beyond the categories and labels that we have created in order to see through this illusion of separation. The other illusion is the illusion that there is lack in this world. There's ample supply for the needs we have. We do not have a supply problem, we have a distribution problem. We have not tapped into the imagination which sees a system which works for all beings. What would it mean to move beyond an economic system which rewards and exploits others for their own benefit? What would it mean to live in a world that sees each being as valuable and worthy just because of who they are, as expressions of the force of energy that is the source of all life? What would it look like to live in a world which works for all? In 1957, Dr. A.T. Arizante, a high school teacher, took groups of high school students to poor villages in Sri Lanka to donate their labor. This was the beginning of the Sarandawa Shamanda movement. Today, it is a large self-help development movement based on the Buddhist and Gandhian principles. They have orphanages for battered children, work on rural water and solar energy projects, provide legal services, promote women's projects and economic development, have a Grame-style micro-lending banks, and so much more. In 1997, Abdullah went to Sri Lanka and experienced some of what a world that works for all would look like. There, people from all around the world came to donate their time and resources to work at Sarvandaya. The goal is comprehensive, nonviolent social transformation. Part of the movement and Sarvandaya is the Sarvandaya Canteen. Here, meals are served twice a day, and they have British tea time twice a day. Lunch is the biggest meal of the day. The noontime meal is unusual in the following ways. Foreigners are set at a table with tablecloths, served with fine china, and family-style platters filled with more than enough food to satisfy those who are eating. Sri Lankans, on the other hand, eat from a wide, shallow bowl made from metal. They line up at the kitchen door and receive a large portion of food to be eaten at the other tables. Should they desire seconds, they are free to return to the kitchen for more. To those of us who have done any diversity training, this might seem discriminatory. Why doesn't everyone receive their food in the same way? In order to understand, we must understand the Sri Lankan culture. It is in Sri Lankan culture to offer abundant food and hospitality to guests. What is important is that this system works for Sri Lankans. For all who eat in this canteen, there is enough. No one walks away hungry, and the culture is honored. This works for all because it follows 3 hallmark principles in creating a world that works for all, according to Abdullah. The first principle is enoughness. Everyone has enough, even though the resources are not shared equally. The second principle is exchangeability. Trading places would be okay. In other words, would you be willing to trade places with another person? For example, in our culture, would you be willing to change places with a person working a minimum wage job and struggling to make ends meet? Would you be willing to change places with someone living in a low-income neighborhood with rundown housing? If the answer is no, then the principles of enoughness and exchangeability are not working. The third principle is common benefit. The system is designed and intended to benefit all. If these 3 criteria are met, then we have a world that works for all. In these 3 principles, Abdullah is giving us something to work for rather than against. There is so much energy spent on working against that we stifle our creative imagination to work for and toward this world that works for all. What would it mean to work for rather than against? When justice is on our side, there is no stopping the train. However, we must remain centered and focused on what we passionately believe in. To act from a place where we are against something gives energy to a fight that is not helpful. It only furthers the divide because we are not offering another solution, another way to address core issues. In order to be a people who act for, we must be rooted in our spiritual practices of caring for our mind, body, and spirit each and every day. Caring for ourselves is not a selfish act. Rather, it is a gift that we give to the world. Think of it this way. Using an analogy of taking a plane trip. When the flight attendant goes through the safety protocol at the beginning of the flight, he, she, they tell those on a plane about the oxygen mask. Each time, they remind us to put our own oxygen mask on first before helping others. We cannot be of use if we ourselves are passed out. So it is with our lives. When we are tired, our spirits are depleted, our tanks are empty. We cannot be effective in our efforts to make a difference. We cannot be a part of the butterfly effect that changes the world. In order to be intentional, we must open our hearts wide open to all beings, seeing them as people just like us. Each person in this world is living the best life that they know how to live. Maya Angelou said, "Do the best you can until you know better. Then, when you know better, do better." Sometimes people just do not know better. We must assume that everyone we meet is doing the best they can with what they have. And we must assume the same of ourselves. We do not always know the right course of action to take, but we can treat others, even those who are not like ourselves, with love, respect, and compassion. The truth is, we are one, united by a common creative energy. There is no separation. It is only our limited human perspective that we see us versus them. We need to move beyond this sort of belief system. Each of us fits into a category that in one way or another is marginalized. It is not that people who seem to believe so differently from us do not care about the things we care about. They just do so from a different perspective. We are so busy trying to get our points across that we often do not hear the heart of another. We do not hear their needs. We live in a broken society that makes it nearly impossible to live out true justice. What we need to do, Abdullah argues, is to imagine a society that breaks free from the status quo. He says that we need to move beyond labels in order to see each person as worthy of our love. I believe that we are all created in the image and likeness of the divine spirit. Therefore, each of us contains the very DNA of divine energy. Put another way, each of us has a spark of the divine within. We each have the capacity to open our hearts to see the face of those around us. When we do not know what to do, we need to ask ourselves, how can we see the divine spark in the face of the other? To the extent that we are able to do this, then we are acting from a place of true compassion and love. For to see the divine spark in the other is to truly open ourselves up in authentic connection. It is to be vulnerable in ways that transform us from the inside out. To create a world that works for all, we must examine our own biases and the ways that we categorize people. We must look into the eye of others and see them as precious siblings who have wants, needs, and desires. We must take the time to ask questions, be curious, look at the world with wonder, and imagine together what a world that works for them might look like. There's a lot of pain in our country, in this country of ours. We must not be afraid to look at this pain. We need to embrace it rather than resist it. For it is only in embracing the pain of others that we can see the pain in ourselves. We need to heal this pain in order to be made whole. Breaking down the barriers that divide is the only way that we are going to get out of this mess. We need to take our power back and define for ourselves what we are going to embrace and work for rather than what we're going to fight against. It is as we do this that our creativity and imagination flow and we are able to make true, lasting change. What is your dream? How are you going to be a mender that transforms the social order and creates a world that works for all? And so it is, and so we let it be.
Please join in your hymnals on hymn 323.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Filled by the love in this place, go forth out into the world, shining your light brightly as you discover what you are for. Live your dreams fearlessly, embracing who you are as a divine spark. Be the bridge that creates a mender society. And so it is, and so we let it be. Amen.
Thank you so much for watching our service today. We're glad you are part of our online community. We welcome people who are diverse in faith, ethnicity, history, as well as gender identity and sexual orientation. There are so many ways where you can get involved in our community, and one you can do right now is by clicking on like below or subscribing to our channel. Thanks for joining us.